Welcome to Elite Broker, the podcast showcasing the leading players and stories of success from Australia's broking industry.
Hello and welcome back. It's your host today, Annie Kane, talking to a finance broker today in the form of Matt Erwin, the director of Cashman Consulting, or should I call him Matt Cashman Erwin, and we'll find out why in just a moment. But he's had a career spanning a staggering 40 years across the finance industry, seeing everything from every possible angle, starting with the high altitude policy of the Reserve Bank of Australia to the frontline grit of commercial asset finance, looking at cash flow finance, and nowadays really specialising in that cash flow space, working capital and debt solutions for small businesses. But Matt's not just crunching numbers, he relishes rescuing reputations, taking people from on the brink of insolvency to surviving onwards and upwards, whether that's a slow paying debtor crisis or navigating the tightrope of a business turnaround. He spent the last 4 decades proving that while lending rules may change, cash flow is always king. So in this episode of the Advisors Podcast, we're talking to Matt Cashman Erwin about what he's been doing to help SMEs thrive when traditional lending falls short. Thanks for joining me, Matt. How are you going?
Very good, Annie. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Good to have you in and to chat all things cash and flow and finance broking and what you've been seeing in your career. But for anyone who's not met you before or hasn't seen you around the traps here in Sydney, Matt, how did you get into broking in the first place?
It's been it's a long journey. It really goes back well over 40 years because even at school, I really loved doing commerce and then economics. I then studied finance and economics at uni, and that was sort of a catalyst to teach me a little bit of the fundamentals, although I didn't really understand it. And then I joined the Reserve Bank as an undergrad, and it all sort of began from there. What
exactly does an undergrad at the RBA do?
So being an undergrad was a fun thing. It was a great organisation to work for at the time. I was there when a really great governor, Bob Johnson, was the governor of the Reserve Bank. So what did I do there? I started in their investment accounting area, which looked at foreign exchange gains and losses across all the major currencies that the bank traded. Mm-hmm. The other area that I worked in was the investment accounting, which was Commonwealth bonds and treasury notes and doing the accounting and making sure everything was in order. Then I moved into, for 18 months, the short-term money market area where prior to the 2 to 3% ban that we all know in regards to the cash rate that the Reserve Bank manages, I was a part of the settlements and operational team that supported the 2 traders that sold and bought Commonwealth treasury notes and bonds from the authorised dealers and into the market to change the money supply. And then in the early 90s, we changed to the current system. So it's a very exciting time in the 80s doing that. It was very manual. Yeah, and really it's an era that's long gone, but it was certainly an enjoyable time.
That sounds hard.
It was fun.
Pre-internet.
When you're that young, nothing's that hard because you don't know what's ahead of you. But it was a fun time. I made some great friends. I feel very attached to my time at the RBA and very proud of that time because I don't think it was that easy, I was told, to get into. But I really enjoyed it. And I've made some good relationships which are still there today. And then moved into a couple of great corporates, global corporates called Oryx and then Bibby Financial Services. And that really lit the fuse inside me to understand the issues that businesses were having, understand how to solve them, and really become quite passionate and committed to that journey.
Yeah.
So I've been very lucky in that regard. So it's always been finance, and I can talk all day about it if I need to.
Yeah, well, maybe not all day, but maybe for the next half an hour or so, we'll have a chat about it. Though I'm sure we could talk about it all day. But I think it's such an interesting career path when we see people coming into broking, because obviously the industry as a whole is about 40 years old itself. Mm-hmm. So we're only just seeing the first sort of generation of brokers starting to retire. It's a relatively new industry. But finance, of course, has been around for a long, long, long time. So when was it and what was it that made you decide that maybe broking was for you?
All right, so 4 years ago, my business began. I'd been in finance in great lending institutions, non-banks, for a long time.
Yep.
And I thought, and it was sort of that post-COVID era where we were certainly in a transition back to the workplace, you could say.
Yep.
And I thought people keep on tapping me on the shoulder and say, you know what you're doing. Why don't you go out there and run your own business? Why don't you go out there and be that financial advisor that a lot of SME and business owners, directors need to resolve their cash flow issues? So that got me in there to do it. And I thought, and after, like in my first month, I had a good month, and then I just kept the momentum going, and I thought, I can do this. And some of that, imposter syndrome or self-doubt disappeared quite quickly. And I thought, I can do this. I've just got to build the formula and grow the business. And 4 years later, I'm celebrating, a great business. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, and I love the name of it as well. I mean, you're pretty much the Cashman here. And I think that pretty much does what it says on the tin. But are you just focusing now on business finance, or do you do things like personal loans as well?
No, I just do business finance or commercial finance, which would be cash flow type lending, working capital type lending, resolution of creditor issues, and asset finance. Yeah. So from that point of view.
So when you decided to set up your own brokerage and kind of really focus on this space, did you ever consider doing resi as well? Or are you always like, no, I just want to do business finance?
No, my specialty and my background was always in commercial finance or business finance. So I thought I'll stick to my knitting, as they say.
Yeah.
And becoming too diverse from my point of view probably meant some challenges that I wasn't ready for, and there's different types of regulations and processes involved, and it was a big enough challenge to take on my own business in that regard and develop the brand and build the revenue and the reputation.
So one of the first steps, obviously, that most brokers have to make when they're becoming a broker is thinking about, well, which aggregator am I going to join? What kind of model am I going to go down? Should I open my own business as a sole trader? Should I join somebody else's business? Should I become a franchisee of a big branded group? Did you have any of those sort of thought processes or talks, with other people being like, maybe I'll join you or maybe I'll start a franchise? Or did you always go, no, I know I want my own company?
I'd worked with brokers a long time, certainly as a lender in the non-bank space. So I had a good idea of who the good brokers were, who some of my closer mates were, who I could bounce ideas and mentor off. And a lot of them were younger than me, and some people I'd worked with were obviously older than me as well. But I bounced off other brokers. I talked to them. I did have a number of invitations to join their broking house or their group. But I got some advice. I balanced it all off, and I decided to partner with some of those firms rather than actually join them, and thought build my own brand as The Cashman in Cashman Consulting. And that's why I went down the path of starting my own business.
Yeah. I think it's interesting as well. It's called consulting. Can you tell me why you decided to kind of have that name, that word in the title of the company? Because not all brokers would say they're consultants as well.
Well, I see myself as that consultant or advisor, certainly in the finance area. And the Cashman idea had come from an idea I developed in the late 90s as a training mechanism or tool, being the Cashman. And so when I put them all together, I thought, how can I call my business that's not too long, doesn't end up with a long website, for example, was nice and simple to remember. And so going back to the consulting idea, telling and informing, advising and educating clients on how to run their finances better, how to see and view and utilize the tool, which is called money. It's not the goal, it's a tool. Consulting seems the appropriate word for that.
So now you set up Cashman Consulting and you are the Cashman.
Yes.
Is that something that you came up with yourself? Is it just, do you kind of do your clients call you that? Like, is it a whole new persona now?
I've never really put it out there, but effectively in 1999, I got given an opportunity to travel overseas and do some training for some people. And I thought, well, I could do the training, but then maybe I'd develop and make it a bit more fun. So I developed this idea called The Cashman. And then that became an internal bit of we'll call it a fun thing to do. So I started training, and in the end I ended up having a Cashman costume and all these things, and built this whole different persona to myself. And I really quite enjoyed it. So when I started my broking business, I thought, how can I differentiate myself? Whilst it's a little bit different, how can I make it a little bit more fun and create a brand around that? So thecashman.com.au became my website, and Cashman Consulting was the obvious name for my business. So it's a bit of fun, and it's created some longevity as well.
Does the costume still come out? Like, do you take client meetings wearing it?
I've never worn it to a client meeting, but I have worn it to a number of conferences, and I did recently wear it to a small networking group just for a bit of fun because we had a costume day, so it is fun.
That is fun. What does it look like?
It looks like a red suit with a big cape and gloves, and the voice of the Batman, actually. So it's all good.
You changed voice and everything.
That's right. Yes.
Wow, we were really in character.
Why not?
How exciting!
It's been a lot of fun, and a number of my colleagues that I've worked with thought it was fun too, and we were able to have some really fun experiences.
Yeah,
and good.
Love that. Well, the Cashman, thank you for setting that up, and I hope one day to see it. Is it on the website? Can I track it down, a picture anywhere?
No, not on my corporate website.
Yeah.
No. So I've probably tried to separate it a little bit, but I've stuck with the brand idea.
Yeah.
And I do share it occasionally. So it's not the goal; it's a tool. Consulting seems the appropriate word for that. So.
Yeah. And I think particularly in finance broking, commercial broking, there is a real consulting and kind of advice model, a credit advice model, but also lots of finance brokers have to work so closely with their clients and their accountants on what does this actually mean for your business? Where are you going to go? Because unlike in Resi, obviously business loans are really about what does this money mean you can do in the future rather than being you can just buy a house. So when you actually think about that consulting model at the moment, there's lots of small businesses requiring help. There's loads of sole traders in Australia as well that are probably I don't have any finance knowledge. I need some help getting started, or I need to pay off my ATO debt. When you first having a conversation with an SME client, are they typically coming to you just being I need help with a specific issue, or are they kind of looking for an overarching credit advisor?
In the majority, they have a specific issue. So they see the finance problem that they have in their business, whether it's be a specific secured or unsecured creditor, like the ATO as an unsecured creditor, or some other creditor that's pressing them for money, or they're chasing and trying to find the funds to purchase stock, pay wages, and just run their business on a daily basis, let alone, projecting forward. They come to me with those specific issues. Often the catalyst that they have, or the reason for coming to talk to me through an accountant or lawyer, or generally speaking, is very specific. But when you look at their business holistically, that might mean the financial position of the business, you can see why they are where they are. And they've often evolved the finance circumstances, being the lenders that they currently have, by just stacking one on top of another. And sometimes they need to take a step back and think, how do I repay these creditors? How do I manage my situation? So it's generally one specific thing, but when you get in there, you solve that problem and then try and resolve a few other things so they're more sustainable.
And I think that's probably part of the problem-solving element of finance broking, is you're kind of looking under the hood, you're looking at their P&Ls and their balance sheets and being what is actually going on here, and helping them understand that too.
Yes.
When you think about also when you first started up, you had to choose a group to go under, or you could have got your own ACL. What route did you go through?
I got some advice. As I said before, I mentored and worked with a couple of partner firms who I value their friendship and their advice greatly. So what I had to do was join and choose an aggregator, which is quite a challenging task, because you've got the resi type aggregators, you've got the commercial type asset aggregators as well.
Yep.
And then it's a matter of choosing the right culture within that aggregator is really important. So I got advice, did a bit of shopping, and then make a selection. So it was more about why I was joining one aggregator and then what they did from that point of view.
Yeah.
You also need to join an industry association. So I joined CAFBA in that regard. There are 3 of them effectively, and I'd had a long association with them, so I already knew that path from that point of view. The what and the why at that stage.
The Commercial and Asset Finance Brokers Association, CAFBA. Yeah. And did you choose a commercial aggregator, or did you go for a mainstream sort of one that does everything?
Oh, no, they're more an asset aggregator at that time, and partly because of the advice and the quality of that aggregator and what they do. So, It's COG
Yeah.
or platform
Platform.
auto finance.
Yeah,
Yep.
the COG group, which now seems to be, I feel like every time I turn around, there's like another brand name, another company in there. They're quite a big group now and sort of consolidated and merged with different people.
They definitely are, and I think the organisation's grown substantially even in the last 4 years, and they work well for me, certainly in regards to compliance and training and those sort of things. So,
Yeah.
yes.
So now you're actually 4-ish years in to broking.
Yeah.
What have you kind of seen your business do? Because you said that you had a good first month, and I think a lot of brokers will probably be like, oh, I'm so jealous. I didn't settle anything for like 6 months, 7 months, particularly if they're in resi. How did you hit the ground running?
Whilst I was getting my accreditations and broker business set up, obviously, incorporating the right sort of structure and the aggregator and association, you've still got to be marketing. So you've still got to be talking to the referral base, your network, going to functions and doing things like that, keeping that momentum going. The other thing is, I think, setting my expectations correctly about revenues, because some people had told me you won't make $1 or won't make much revenue in the first 12 months. And so I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I just set my benchmark probably low and then just try to exceed it all the time and be realistic about what was going to convert in my pipeline in regards to whether it be a working capital type finance or an asset finance.
Yeah.
Probably also not getting too distracted on every problem that came across my desk and either farming it out to someone else or giving guidance to that client in which direction to go.
So how did you choose what to keep and what to farm?
I looked at what the type of problem was, and generally it was a creditor-related problem in trying to either finance an asset, whether that be a fixed asset or buy a commercial asset like their stock, for example, or looking at the situation of having a working capital problem. I can't pay my creditors, whether they be a trade type creditor, an unsecured finance creditor, a statutory creditor, or a long-term creditor like their finance commitments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the ones that you kind of maybe excited you the most were the ones that you wanted to do, or were they more like the ones that you feel like you kind of had the most expertise in?
All right. The ones that excited me the most were the ones that had probably been to another advisor, we'll call it broker, and probably not got the solution they were looking for, or the one that seemed quite tragic or really challenging to most people in the finance sector. So I took on those challenges and thought, no, I can get somewhere with this client. I know what to do. I have the relationships and partners to do that. And some of that would have included some of the turnaround finance or insolvency-based funding that I might arrange as well.
Yeah.
So,
you're right there, because a lot of brokers might shy away from insolvency-type clients. They'll be like, oh, it feels like it's too hard, or the conversations even are quite hard to have. Like, what is it that you particularly like about that?
well, the insolvency type or turnaround finance type ones, I've done a lot of that over the last 25 years. So I'm quite proud of some of the results I got with some major firms. So I just took all that experience and brought it in. It's very exciting to take a business that's struggling for different reasons and has a profitability problem, a balance sheet problem, or a creditor that doesn't understand their business anymore, and then educate and create expectations with that director to move the business forward into the next phase of its life. And that could be discussing problems, creditor issues with a director in the pre, during or post-insolvency event as well. So,
And I can imagine that it's obviously a very stressful time for your clients, but also a very emotional time for them. So you're going to have to not only know what the solution is, but then also be able to deliver it in a way that's sort of, helpful but sensitive at the same time. I can imagine you probably need some tissues on your desk all the time just in case.
you do. I mean, to me, finance isn't mathematical. It's a science in a lot of ways. It's all about the maths. Do the numbers work? And if you look at a lender, they'll look at the numbers definitely. But then all of us in finance apply a practicality and then attach ourselves to the human side, which is the difficulty that a director or a business owner is facing. So I dealt with that a lot over the years, and I've had clients crying in front of me, thank me in different ways, take me out to dinner. You realise the resolution that you've got that client is you not just turn their provided or arranged the finance to turn their business around. You also kept 5, 10, 100 employees working, which is great.
Yep.
You've kept people in the case of the directors, certainly maybe in their family home, and you've certainly sometimes prevented some personal tragedies in some cases as well because you've been able to finance. So it's quite emotional for them, but it's quite rewarding for me when they get the good results.
Yeah.
So, yes.
We're going to take a quick break here, Matt. When we come back, I'd like to talk to you about the money tool and how else you actually do what you do day in, day out. And we'll get into that just after this message. So, Matt, you talked earlier about money. Now, this isn't obviously the money that we all use. This is something that you're using in your brokerage. Walk me through what that is and why you use it.
Money is a tool. So a lot of the time when you look at it, and even the younger version of myself would look at money as a goal, all right? And it's a goal, but it's a tool to me, because if you have it, if you need to buy something, you need money to buy it, whether it's a cup of coffee, pay for a dinner, buy a new car, buy a house, buy an asset for your business, or buy a business. You only need the money when you need to spend it, all right? But it's also a matter of organising that money or that tool before you need to spend it. So for a lot of business owners, often it happens they go and buy something, but then they go and find the money to buy it. So it's about getting a bit chicken and egg in a way, but it's also about saying, I want to have a business that turns over $1 million or $10 million, but as you grow and change, you need to make sure you've got the right tools there, whether they're, the assets that you use, you need to have the right resourcing, i.e. staff, but you also need to have the money to be able to cash flow that, whether you're running a business that gets paid in advance or paid on delivery or paid on terms. So having the right money or tools in place is really, really important.
Do you think that most of the loans that you write now, are they mostly secured or unsecured?
Oh, most of them are unsecured loans. Yeah. And unsecured has different meanings as well.
Yeah, because you could, I suppose, be like invoice finance. Is that secured or unsecured? Like, are you securing against an invoice? But yeah.
It's also, it's a matter of often defining what that sometimes means for the client so that their expectations are delivered. So often I'll have a conversation with the client to say, you can get an unsecured loan or a secured loan, and I'll deliberately have that so that they know what it means. So technically, to me, a secured loan would mean there's generally a first or second mortgage, and possibly a caveat. There are other forms of security over a company and things like that, but it generally means that there's some sort of property security involved.
And so when you now look at the types of people coming to you, because you said obviously when you first started you were kind of talking to other brokers and you were getting business elsewhere, how do you now generate business?
So I still try and work on my network. I've joined a couple of chambers of commerce that I engage as heavily as I can with regular meetings. I also have joined a LinkedIn networking group to promote myself and my business on LinkedIn, and also promote myself within that group. I see that group particularly as referrers as opposed to potential clients, and that way it works for me. Social media has become obviously a lot more prevalent in the last 20 years, but particularly, and it's evolving all the time. So trying to keep up with that is a challenge. I've done a lot on LinkedIn over the last 4 years, and that's certainly helped me maintain a profile. I've expanded that in the last couple of years into Instagram and Facebook as well. And that's getting some traction, certainly in maintaining my profile.
So do you kind of also, these are sort of groups, I'm assuming, like the Chamber of Commerce sort of group, where you're having to talk to other businesses because you're not really wanting to connect with other brokers necessarily, you're wanting to find business clients. Do you do anything like sort of face-to-face as well? Like, do you go to any events or to any expos? Is there any sort of area that you're like, this is really like my bread and butter clients are going to be here?
Yeah, so I do. I go to accounting, like exhibitions, which might be down in Darling Harbour or somewhere in Sydney, things like that, accounting expos and things like that. I go to insolvency events, which could be industry-based, national or state.
Yep.
They might be conferences as well as the dinners and things like that. And I try and just keep an open mind to what comes across my desk through social media as well as through email to make sure that I'm not missing out on an opportunity. Because often you'll go to an event, and I went to one a couple of months ago. First time someone invited me, it was a professional services, so accountants, lawyers, and other brokers. And I went along. Within 2 weeks, I had a phone call because somehow I must have triggered the right ideas with the person who contacted me and said, I need to talk to you about cash flow, which was really good.
Perfect.
So it's probably a fairly diverse type of strategy, and it keeps me out a couple of nights a week. But it's also about managing that time as well.
Yeah,
So.
And I think that's always one of the key things, kind of being like, well, how do I spread my time because it's so finite and, precious. So making sure that you are getting return on investment. But I think, events are so interesting to me as well. We often see that kind of longer, slow burn, as you said there. It might be weeks later where you actually have someone go, you know what, I talked to a guy recently and I know who the right person is. But I think that's really interesting. Do you do much work with accountants and financial planners?
Not financial planners per se. I do know some, and often I might refer to financial planners because people come to me with those personal problems which are related to financial planning, and I pass those over. Accountants definitely, because they're really the front. They're really the first point of contact for a lot of business owners, SMEs, directors, shareholders, and whether there's an issue within the corporate structure or a financial issue within that business, they go to their accountant because their accountant has the connection to lodging returns with the tax office and reporting to ASIC about changes in the business. So they need specialists like myself, like consultants, advisors in the finance sector, because the problems can be quite complicated. They can be distracting to the accounting business. And more importantly, there's so many lenders out there in the different asset classes or different types of lenders. An accountant can't be across all of those things. So a specialist broker or finance specialist like myself makes that path a little bit easier.
Who are your favourite lenders to work with?
The favourite lenders? You want names?
Yeah, I want to know who they are.
There's a whole lot of lenders in each category, and without prejudicing those that I might mention, if I don't tend to deal with the banks, although I'd like to, but their benchmarks are far too high for some brokers to reach in regards to volumes. You can use the aggregator to do that. The non-bank sector, which includes the fintechs, which includes the debtor finance, trade finance people, and then their private lenders is really important. I have been using in the trade finance. There's so many great firms. If I mention them in no particular order, Scottish Pacific, Money Tech are very good. Nova, Cashflow, AR Cashflow are very good. There's Early Pay that are good as well.
Do you use many private lenders?
I do. So I tend to have a few relationships in, there's the Oaks, or there was GMI or Principal Funding, there's Chifley, there's a whole lot of them in that category, and they tend to be somewhat driven on results, but definitely on relationships so you can get across. And there's also the fintech lenders, which I mentioned before. So definitely, there's the Shift, Prosper, Banjo, FIFO, who also do trade finance and debtor finance.
So you've got quite a broad array of lenders that you use.
Yeah, and I won't say it's necessarily easy either, and it's not meant to be easy, but they do offer different products with different terms, which include pricing and securities. They do offer different turnaround times, and the most important part of their appetite is their ability to absorb credit risk and the issues that business might be dealing with. Yeah, from that point of view.
When you actually then are writing a loan, so I wonder what your process looks like. Do you follow a specific set of steps? Do you use technology to help you write a loan? How are you actually doing it? If I walked up to you and was like, hey, Matt, I need to pay out my ATO debt, what would happen next?
All right. So I would definitely be using and making sure I record and get the main details of that client and then into my CRM system so that I've got it recorded and it doesn't get lost, because you get phone calls and distractions and new opportunities all the time. I definitely want to try and understand what the client's thinking so that I can understand where their expectations might be driving the process. And they may have some experience or may think they know the solution, but there might be a better one. I will often seek information from that client, which is electronic, through getting financial information, identity information, so you can go down the path of anti-money laundering. I try and deal with the Privacy Act appropriately. And collecting that basic information helps a lot. But even in that process, you've really got to understand what sort of business. Is it a manufacturing business? Is it a wholesale business? Is it a retail, B2B or a B2C type situation? Because that will help you define what sort of assets are on the balance sheet. So my process mandates for me that I will always look to obtain the appropriate funding through a balance sheet finance solution or basically a cash flow finance, which is a bank statement type analysis solution, rather than going down the property path.
Yeah.
Of, involving mortgages and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So.
And do you then, when it comes down to whittling down lenders, you kind of were saying there, the industry obviously plays a factor there, but do you also then think about, what else is it that you're thinking about when you're choosing or trying to come up with recommendations for where you'd like to take the business?
You develop as a broker a number of really great relationships with the BDMs, and obviously you want that BDM to be aligned with where they're working, because then they can convey. You can have a short discussion about, would they look at that deal? Is it appropriate? How would we mitigate some of the problems or some of the risks for that lender to put money out the door? Is it appropriate? So often I will think about the type of business that's operating. I will think about what sort of funding solution. Is it a 2 or 3 stage funding solution? So I get the money today to then move them in 6 months or upgrade it. Is it an expansionary type solution where I get them an amount of money today and then move them into a larger facility in that client because they then qualify for something different? What assets are there to be seen as primary security, for example, whether it's debtors, whether it's a stock type or trade type finance facility. So I would say it's quite complicated, but I think my path is definitely find out what they do and then look at the balance sheet and the circumstances. And that could mean in some cases they're making money, they're profitable, so they have a net profit, or in other cases there isn't a profitability showing. So that would exclude out some asset finance type lenders, for example.
Yeah.
So it tends to work, to answer your question, on who would do this deal and what would, exclude them from certain lenders.
How many deals do you reckon you write a year now?
Probably in the vicinity of last year, maybe 120.
Yeah. So you're doing quite a bit of work to get all these, businesses across the line. But over 4 years, I mean, that's a lot of businesses you've helped.
It is, but
all the same ones repeatedly.
Yeah, often it's the same ones repeatedly because they keep coming back to you, and they might upgrade their facility, so they might look for more money. If you've done in my opinion, the why you're doing this solution, as opposed to this is what you've got to do. I like to explain why we're doing a certain thing. The client gets it. So whether it's a line of credit or a loan, for example, they have very different outcomes for the client and the business and the cash flow. So I tend to explain that in great detail. And then they just come back to you. And then there's the new clients. Like I had a call this morning from a client who's wondering about how to use their overdraft in regards to paying their creditors in the tax office and some of their other obligations. And for some clients, it can be quite a challenge because they just don't know how to use that tool called money.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. When you go look at then, I suppose, how you manage your workload, because as I said, it's kind of a bit full on. You've got all your time doing different things. You've got to do a LinkedIn post. You've got to talk to a client. You've got to read credit policy. You've got to do the paperwork of actually getting the loan and also generate new business.
Yes.
There's a lot to do as a broker.
Yes.
So how do you run your workload? Like, do you have a set thing that you do each day? Do you have a kind of itemized calendar? Is it all organic? I wonder how you actually manage to get through everything.
It's probably a little bit of everything in a way. There is certainly an element of being ad hoc in what I do during the day because you'll get a phone call and you'll have planned to join a group meeting or a Zoom type meeting, but sometimes that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
So there are facets where I know I've got to do certain things. I get documents ready or request documents or get an application finished because it needs to be done. And then it's a matter of probably, in summary, planning half my day and then the rest will just fill out with all good things. So that means you've got to be touching your social media. You've got to be touching even your Xero accounts to keep your accounting up to date, I think.
Your own accounts.
Yeah, your own accounts. You've got to be looking at a bit of planning every week about what's happening next week. What am I posting? Where am I going from that point of view? You've got to touch base with lenders. So sometimes, well, they'll ring you, definitely, but you'll ring them too, and you'll run scenarios by them. And those conversations, whilst everyone mightn't come off, they create that rapport that you need to get the deal, Because often a client will ring you and you'll spend half an hour on the phone and you'll basically be able to solve some of their problem, or you don't know what else they're thinking, and that they might go away and not come back again because you've actually given them the answer. And that's a good situation to be in, helping and assisting those sort of businesses. They're not always paid engagements, but it's about doing the right thing, and I think it comes back to you in time.
Yeah.
So my day is somewhat organised but also ad hoc, because you've got to be able to have the capacity to take phone calls, return phone calls, and be diligent. So communicating is really an important part of making sure people are happy.
Do you use any tools or technology in your day-to-day? Because you mentioned already about, like electronically receiving documentation and also your CRM platform. Is there anything that you kind of rely on each day that is a really core part that helps you do what you do?
Oh, definitely my CRM. So I run a couple of pipelines. So one is I run a cash flow working capital pipeline, and I run an asset finance pipeline. So I break those two categories because they're two different types of lending and two different types of credit assessment, depending on serviceability effectively. So CRM is really important. I use one-page CRM, which is really, it's cheap, it's a cost-effective, very sophisticated type model, and there's so many on the marketplace to use. But I'd have good experience in those sort of things. That works well. I also use my aggregator platform called Cog Connect, which helps me to manage some of the applications and that process and streamline that into a document. That works really well. And then obviously I was using a laptop when I'd go out, but now my phone has everything on it, so I can do so much when I'm on the road or even travelling. And I tend to, even in that time management, use that by using public transport, which helps. Sounds a bit basic, but it allows you to do an awful lot when you're sitting on a train or the metro to do what you need to do.
Yep.
So technology, the faster you embrace it, whilst it's a challenge and change, it does work to your benefit big time,
I wonder about the types of loans you're writing at the moment. And I mentioned earlier ATO debt, and I think you have two, and insolvencies. And we have seen quite a lot of pressure in the system, I think, the last couple of years, particularly from the ATO becoming more aggressive, but also I think small businesses finding it quite hard.
Yes.
Is that what you're experiencing? Are you seeing it being quite difficult times for small businesses?
I do, and I'm quite empathetic to their situation, because effectively the ATO has trained their clients, which is the small business and the taxpayers, how to manage their tax affairs. And now we're in a regime where it was very soft for a long time, and even before COVID, the collections was slow and inconsistent. And now we're in a phase with government whereby collections is quite hard. Compliance is very important, lodging on time. So that puts a lot of pressure on directors and financial controllers and CFOs to put things in, get it to their accountant and get it lodged. There's a lot more DPNs coming out, or director penalty notices. And the ATO regime, it's fair enough, people have to pay their taxes, but it's ramped up quite considerably in the last couple of years. And we're seeing that in the insolvency results in regards to the number of SBRs or small business restructuring. We're seeing it with voluntary administrations and even, unfortunately, liquidations or the closing of businesses as well. And I'm quite, how do I say it?
Sympathetic?
I'm empathetic to them at all, because a lot of the cases you can resolve it, but I'm quite across all the language and jargon and some of the technical aspects of all of these types of insolvency, which allows me to work with practitioners, insolvency practitioners and liquidators through these. Otherwise, you can't get the finance done in a timely manner. So the ATO has ramped up, which has made it hard, and the office and the state OSR in New South Wales.
Yeah.
In regards to payroll tax.
Payroll tax, yes, which is something we've been talking about, not just from a broking to client perspective, but also, of course, in the broking industry as well.
Yes.
Payroll tax has been a big topic of conversation. Apart from ATO debt, are there any other kind of like big themes that you're seeing in terms of what's running business finance at the moment? What's driving businesses to seek finance?
I think some of them, business owners have to be very proactive and entrepreneurial, and they have to be thinking about their business 24/7, even when they go on leave, if they have a holiday. So what's driving them is, how do I grow my business, or how do I maintain my business? So that can mean they generally act when there's a catalyst. So it could be a creditor that they need to find money to pay for, which could be an older creditor, or it could be the situation where there's a business opportunity. They've seen that opportunity and they now need to fund that opportunity, which could be the buying of stock, the putting on of 2 more staff in business development or new business areas. They need 3 more operational staff in the warehouse, but to fund that is very difficult. And a good example of some of that that's going to come up is when superannuation goes into is due and payable on payday, effectively. So that the middle of this year, 1st of July, I think it starts. And I'm not an accountant, but I think that starts. That's going to cause a big change in the cash flow of many businesses. So this is going to create more opportunities for finance, which directors are aware of, I think. But necessarily the implications will hit in July.
That's actually a really good tip, I think, because so many brokers, particularly in the finance space, will start really ramping up April, May towards the end of financial year in preparation for not only closing off the year that's just been, but also in preparing for the new financial year.
Correct.
But often will neglect to think about what's actually happening in tax changes. So whether that's instant asset write-offs or, as you said, sort of there, like, superannuation changes. We're pretty fortunate here at the Advisor. I sit next to our accounting titles, so I often hear what they're talking about and being like, oh, actually, I think that works for what we're doing and what we're writing about over in the broking industry, because there is crossover. And, as you said, there'll be some things like that where it's like brokers should know that because it's going to drive demand. Maybe they need to think about, are they prepared to meet it?
Oh, they definitely do. The 2 professions, accounting and finance broking, definitely cross over an awful lot. They interact because brokers need financials to get finance approved, and the impact of a broker's work will be seen by the accountant in regards to what's happening if there are unfunded liabilities on the balance sheet, and even the situation of having the accountant paid regularly. They're professional services, and often I see some accountants that I deal with are not paid regularly, or they're on payment arrangements. So it's very interesting when I have that conversation with my clients about, are you paying your accountant regularly? It's a really important thing because they're the ones that are going to help us get what you need in your business. So we need to make sure your accountant's paid and your accounts are up to date.
Yeah. Make sure they're doing a good job for you.
That's exactly right. So there's a lot of catalysts all the time for change, and I think it's not a bad thing that they're moving the superannuation payments forward, but it will place an additional cost, burden, and stress on directors and business owners in funding that arrangement.
Paying it, yeah.
But it will be to the benefit of employees, which is very important.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, I'd like to talk to you about your plans for the year ahead. We're at the beginning of a new calendar year. So what do you want to achieve in 2026? What do you want to achieve with your brokerage moving forward? And your top advice for brokers coming into the space for the first time as well. And we'll get into it just after this message. So Matt, you've talked there about how you write some of your business, how you find loans, what sort of things you're seeing from clients. But if you think about 2026, aside from the new superannuation thing coming in July, is there anything you're really keeping an eye out for that you're either excited about or anxious about that you're going to see in the 2026?
This year, there's often new products that come out from lenders and in the non-bank space, and some of it you've just got to work out what the differences are to where they were or how they might differentiate between the lenders. So that might be lenders offering a new line of credit, might be increasing their limits. And that's why it's important to keep in contact with the BDMs in these types of lenders, because they're the ones that help you get the deals across the line. So innovation in that area is good. There's always levels of – the lenders are very much running lender portals or broker portals, so we can access credit processes a lot quicker and cleaner, and they're fairly streamlined, but they're always evolving as well. So sometimes you'll log on and the processes change a little bit. I've been invited to speak at a couple of conferences, so accounting conferences. So I'll be talking about non-bank lending in non-insolvent areas, and what opportunities, how lenders access clients, and what sort of products they're offering. And I'm also going to another accounting conference, so I'll be talking about what's happening with clients through different phases of the business cycle. So that's a really big opportunity. So I get, about an hour's spot at each of those conferences, which is very good.
Yeah.
That should be fun. And I'm part of that network, so I feel very privileged that they've asked me to be a part of that as well. In regards to my business, I'm trying to grow my business, so I'm outsourcing things. I haven't put on another broker at this stage, but I do outsource things and talk to my broker partners from that point of view. And then I also use my aggregator to some degree. So some of it will be growth through my network, but I also want to do some organic type growth through basically building my brand through social media and opportunities like you provided today, through the media to get my name out there and see the Cashman as a premium broking service for clients that need it.
Yeah. And when you think about moving forward, so let's say in another 4 years' time, double the amount of time that we've had so far, what do you hope that your business is doing then? Where do you hope to be?
I probably hope to be at a few people. I do have opportunities to move forward with that. I have not scaled to a larger number at this stage because of different factors. I do have a clear agenda, so I want to get through this year building my brand through my existing partners, the social media, and then see where I'm at the end of the year. That's probably part of it. I do generate a healthy amount of business for myself, and part of it is also being able to importantly service clients. And whilst I can basically pass things down and train other people, that's important as well. But I still feel like I need to have access to some of my clients directly from that point of view. So, yeah.
And you mentioned earlier about, how there's loads of different lenders and there are some products that fit some places and some products that don't. Is there any, do you have any ideas of a dream product you would love to see a lender come out with and be like, this is what we're missing?
I'd like to see some, yes, I do. And that would be effectively a lot of the discussions I have about cash flow are about meeting commitments as and when they fall due effectively. So wages, it could be paying tax on time, which saves you on general GIC, general interest charge. But the product that I'd like to see is a more flexible line of credit type situation. Often they are secured by a guarantee and a loan agreement or a line of credit agreement, but they probably a little bit in the expensive range for some clients, so they tend to not borrow at that range, which is disappointing. I'd like to be able to tell lenders, say, look, if you just put a GSA on or a general security agreement, a company security on, that might lower the rate or de-risk or mitigate some of the risk in that product. So that's a real area. And then obviously the limits on those products are all relative. Sometimes clients need not just that line of credit, they need a slightly bigger line of credit. So I'd like to see the lenders stretch themselves a little bit on that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
More flexible lines of credit.
That's right.
Yeah. And when you think about, I guess, also looking at what you kind of do to stay on top of being your best self. So you mentioned already about networking and learning and talking to BDMs, but also kind of day to day, it's quite hard to stay at your kind of peak practice because there's so much going on, which is why it's so important, I think, for people to really take some time out and to make sure they're looking after themselves as well. Often here on the podcast, we'll talk about what people do to unwind and de-stress. And people nearly always joke and say, what is that? Because it's quite hard. You work flat out as a small business owner. But it's so important that we are thinking about taking time to actually really kind of rebalance, I think, some of the stress levels in being a small business owner. What do you do to unwind and de-stress?
I really, if I'm not talking about finance, I'm talking about cycling. So I ride a bike, a push bike, not an e-bike, not a motorbike, a road bike.
Yep.
And I've been riding nearly all my life since I was a young boy. I just love it. I've ridden in different types of tours in New South Wales. Done some charity work through cycling as well. But I'll ride my bike probably, not 7 days a week, but probably 5, sometimes 6. Most weeks it's 3 or 4 days a week. I rode this morning, which is great, great fun. Get up 5:30 on the bike, all that sort of stuff. So that's really great. I ride with a group of mates. We all sort of de-stress each other, share our lives, have a coffee afterwards, and then go home and get back into work.
Yeah.
So if I didn't cycle, that's a bit of a problem. Family's obviously always important. And always there, and you do tend to, focus on that as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way as well of staying in shape, like cycling as well, because it's hard work.
Being healthy is an important part of probably longevity, and in so many ways in our lives. And we obviously have dinners and functions and all sorts of things, but being healthy through exercise and hopefully a good diet so you can ride well is really important.
Yeah. And when you think about sort of if you could go back in time now and know what you've learned over the last 4 years in broking, what would you have done differently, or what advice would you have given yourself then that you've learned over the 4 years?
I probably would have had a lot more self-belief earlier in my career. I definitely would have started broking earlier in my career, probably 5 or 6 years before. That's probably the two biggest things. And are they? And you haven't asked this, but are they regrets? They're not regrets. They're just those couple of big picture things that said you could do this. You could do this all along. Why didn't you do it earlier?
Yeah.
And not to say I regretted the path that I took.
No, but hindsight is 20/20, isn't it?
Yeah, I could have done. I wouldn't have been a broker as a younger person. But I think that the journey put me there, and I'm very proud and pleased that the journey did put me there.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to new brokers just starting out as finance brokers?
Make sure you set yourself up properly. Make sure you draw on all those experiences. Whilst I do meet brokers who start out at very early in their career, make sure you're getting the right qualifications, education behind you, so you can stand on those. And whilst that doesn't mean go and get a degree or anything like that. Make sure you understand what the market is about. Having the experience of working in a lender does help. I think that talking to colleagues, because there's a reason why you want to get into broking, to make sure you join an aggregator that's suitable at the time. Definitely join an industry association and do a lot of networking. Try and develop who you are very early and define a path, because broking can be quite diverse, and I don't think you can be everything to all people in finance, in a business, but you can certainly do some areas very well, and that'll provide a very sustainable and successful career.
Awesome. Great advice there, Matt. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your story here on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you having me, Annie. Thank you so much.
If you've got any questions for me or for Matt, then do feel free to reach out. You can reach me at editor@theadvisor.com.au and Matt at Cashman Consulting, of course. I'm sure I'd be happy to help if you need some questions.
I would love it. Thank you very much.
And if you've got any other things that you want us to know about or hear about, or you've got any thoughts or advice that you think other brokers should know about, then do feel free to reach out. Of course, check out other podcasts that are on the Advisor Podcast Network channel. We've got about 10 years worth of podcasts on there now. Everything from elite broker to new broker to looking at products in focus, what's making headlines, unpacking the news. Of course, the monthly magazine as well. And if you're thinking about what is next in business broking, how do I scale my operations? How do I nail AI marketing? Then do make sure you come along to the Better Business Summit this year, going to 5 states across March and April, teaching you about the difference between SEO and GEO and why you need to know that. Also looking at how the top 25 brokerages in Australia have scaled their businesses with a real-world case study from SmartMove, plus some performance advice and Shark Tank Maxine Horner talking about what she thinks successful businesses look like and what she thinks you can be doing to better yours. Do make sure you come along, betterbusinesssummit.com.au. We'll have you back here next week for another episode on the Advisor Podcast Network.